Why are we so sure that every person has rights? Why do we trust science more than myths? Why does freedom seem natural to us? Even though for most of human history it was an unattainable dream. We rarely ask these questions. We live inside ideas, like a fish lives in water. And therefore, we don't notice them. But what seems self-evident today was once a revolution of reason. Each of these ideas arose in a specific historical context, challenged traditions and authorities, and each of them fought for its place in history. Western philosophy is not a collection of museum artifacts. It is a drama of thought, where ideas collide, are born in crises, and continue to live within us. Today, I will talk about 10 such ideas, and if you stay until the end, you will see. Philosophy is not an abstract game, but a mirror in which our hopes, our fears, and our decisions are reflected. The first idea, Rationality and Logos. Western philosophy began with the claim that the world can be understood by reason. The Greeks called this order Logos. The 7th to 6th centuries BCE. The world of the ancient Greeks was full of myths. Lightning was the anger of Zeus. The sea stormed because Poseidon was enraged. Every person's fate was a toy of the gods. And suddenly, the first thinkers, Thales, Anaximander, Heraclitus, decided nature is explained not by the will of the gods, but by its inner laws. Thales said, "Everything is water." It sounds primitive, but it was a colossal shift. For the first time, it was asserted that the world has a single foundation. The world has a structure. It is not chaotic. Cosmos, not chaos. This structure is accessible to the human mind. The causes of phenomena must be sought in nature, not in myth. Truth is knowable through arguments, through proofs, through observation. Heraclitus introduces the concept of logos, a universal law that orders everything. He wrote, "Although the logos is eternal, people do not understand it. Two crucial postulates stand here. Order exists, and a person can understand it if one learns to think." Aristotle turned this into a system: logic, biology, metaphysics. Pythagoras discovered that numbers can describe the harmony of the cosmos. This was the birth of science, but logos was not always the obvious authority. In the Middle Ages, reason was subordinated to faith. Augustine declared that knowledge without God is empty. Logos did not disappear, but became the handmaid of theology. Only in the Renaissance and early modern period did it again come to the forefront. Every time we check data in a study, every time we demand evidence, every time we trust that medicine works by the laws of chemistry, not sorcery, we inherit the ancient logos. But here lies a risk, reducing everything to formulas, ignoring what cannot be turned into numbers. Today, this tension is visible in debates between science and the humanities, between technocracy and art. The first revolution of Western thought asserts, the world is rational and knowable, but knowledge of the world is not enough. We must ask, how should we live in this world? That is how philosophy turned toward ethics. The second idea, ethics and the search for the good. Philosophy has always been not only about how the cosmos is arranged, but also about how to live with dignity. The 5th century BCE, Athens. The polis, this city-state, experiences both war and a democratic flowering. In this time, Socrates walks the streets and asks one single question: what is the good? For a warrior culture, where honor and victory were the supreme values, this was subversive. Socrates said, Wealth, strength, fame do not make life good. The true good is in the soul. The good exists as an objective reality. It can be sought and discussed. A person must subject their life to continual examination. The unexamined life is not worth living. Virtue is knowledge. Vice is ignorance. And every human being is responsible for their choices. Aristotle develops this in the Nicomachean Ethics. Happiness, eudaimonia, is activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. The good is not external, but internal. It is formed through habits, through character, through education. And virtue itself is the ability to find the golden mean between extremes, courage between cowardice and recklessness, generosity between stinginess and prodigality. The Stoics taught, live in harmony with nature and fate, mastering the passions. The Epicureans affirmed, the highest good is pleasure, but prudent, measured pleasure. Christianity moved the good into the sphere of love and mercy. Love your neighbor. And in the modern era, Kant declared, the good is not a feeling, but a duty, a universal law, the categorical imperative. Today, ethics is not an abstract matter. It is climate policy. It is artificial intelligence. It is bioethics. Every time you choose more profit or less harm to nature, you are participating in a debate that began on the streets of Athens. Ethics revealed this. The human being is responsible for their own self-formation. But then philosophers asked, what about freedom and power? And thus, the idea of democracy was born. The third idea, freedom and democracy. If Logos affirmed that the world is governed by reason, and ethics that a person must seek the good within, then the third revolution of thought was political, freedom and democracy. The idea that power could come not from kings or gods, but from the people, was profoundly subversive for the ancient world. The 5th century BCE, Athens. The polis enters its golden age. Citizens gather in the agora to debate laws and vote. This was a daring experiment, political life as the shared task of equals, though limited, because women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded. Rome added another dimension, law. Cicero wrote, true law is right reason in agreement with nature. It is universal and eternal. The Romans created a system in which LAW stood above the individual, even above the emperor. This became the foundation of the Western legal tradition. Power belongs to citizens, isonomia, equality before the law. Law is higher than any single person. The political community exists for the common good, not private interest. And freedom is not anarchy, but participation and responsibility. Ancient democracy was fragile and limited. Athens executed Socrates. The Roman Republic gave way to an empire. In the Middle Ages, freedom nearly disappeared under monarchs and the church. But in the 16th century, the Reformation revived the question of freedom of conscience. In the 17th century, John Locke declared, men being by nature all free, equal, and independent, and affirmed natural rights, life, liberty, property. The 18th century Enlightenment carried these ideas further. Rousseau wrote, man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. His social contract became the manifesto of democratic revolutions. The American Revolution enshrined freedom and democracy in its constitution. For the first time, a people proclaimed themselves the source of power. The French Revolution made the slogan, liberty, equality, fraternity, the symbol of a new age. From that point on, freedom and democracy ceased to be a rare Athenian experiment. They became a universal claim, a political ideal for the entire world. Today, we debate the boundaries of free speech, the rights of minorities, the crisis of democracy in the age of populism and social media. Every vote, every petition, every post that challenges power is a direct inheritance of this long tradition. But democracy cannot be taken for granted. It survives only through participation. The idea of freedom and democracy revealed that a human being is not only an individual, but also a citizen. Yet for this idea to endure, it needed a foundation of knowledge. How can we be certain of truth in a world where old authorities have collapsed? Thus was born the age of rationalism. We are talking about freedom, so you are also free to hit that subscribe button. One tiny click, and suddenly you're a citizen of this channel. The fourth idea, rationalism and faith in reason, the 17th century. Europe is ablaze with religious wars. Old authorities have crumbled. Faith no longer provides a common ground. At this moment, philosophers sought a new foundation, and René Descartes declared, reason itself can be the unshakable basis of truth. After the Reformation, there was no longer one faith. Catholics and Protestants fought. Societies were fractured. Against this backdrop, Descartes began his methodical doubt, to doubt everything until something absolutely indubitable remained, and he found it in thought itself. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Doubt is not a threat, but a method for purifying knowledge. The only indubitable fact is the act of thinking. Reason is autonomous. It does not need the authority of tradition or faith. Truth must be clear, distinct, and demonstrable. Mathematics and geometry are models of precision toward which all knowledge should aspire. Benedict Spinoza pushed this to the extreme. For him, God and nature were one and the same, an infinite system of laws. He wrote, "By God I understand a being absolutely infinite. That is, a substance consisting of infinite attributes." This was a revolution. God ceased to be a personal being and became the very structure of reality. Rationalism became the heart of the scientific revolution. Galileo, Newton, Leibniz wrote the laws of the universe as mathematical equations. But it provoked opposition. Empiricists like Locke and Hume argued, reason without experience is empty. The church saw a threat. If reason is autonomous, where is the place for revelation? This conflict between reason and experience, reason and faith, defined modern philosophy. Today, rationalism lives in our demand for evidence. Clinical trials in medicine, statistics in politics, logic in technology. Yet we also see its limits. Reason alone cannot answer questions of meaning or value. Rationalism, therefore, is not the end, but a stage, a powerful instrument, but not an absolute. Rationalism marked the second great revolution of reason. But it also exposed its limit. Without experience, reason becomes an empty system. This is what the empiricists seized upon, insisting that all knowledge begins with experience. The fifth idea, empiricism and experience. If the rationalists claimed that reason by itself could construct a system of truth, their opponents replied, reason without experience is an empty abstraction. True knowledge begins not in the mind, but in contact with the world. The 17th to 18th centuries, England and Scotland. Here a different current of philosophy arose, empiricism. John Locke, in his essay concerning human understanding, wrote, "There is nothing in the intellect that was not first in the senses." This was a direct challenge to the Cartesian belief in innate ideas. Locke argued, the human being is born as a tabula rasa, a blank slate on which experience gradually writes its text. There are no innate ideas. All knowledge comes from experience. Reason is not an independent source of truth, but a tool for processing sensations. Causality and laws are not absolutes, but habits formed from repeated experience. Truth must be tested through observation and experiment. David Hume pushed empiricism to its radical edge. He argued, we never actually perceive cause. We see only the sequence of events. When one billiard ball strikes another, we see contact and motion, but not a necessary connection. Causality, Hume concluded, is a product of habit, not a law built into reality. This shook the foundations of both science and religion. If causality is not absolute, what supports our proofs? Empiricism gave rise to scientific practice, laboratories, observation, statistics. But it also cornered philosophy. If everything reduces to experience, how can we explain the universal truths of mathematics or logic? This crisis would later drive Kant to attempt a synthesis. Today, empiricism underlies science. We trust data, not dogma. We check reviews before buying, read studies, consult statistics. Modern data science and artificial intelligence are direct heirs of the empirical principle. Observe, collect facts, draw conclusions. But in a world of post-truth, empiricism is distorted. Experience turns into personal opinion. It seems to me, replaces objective fact. This reveals just how fragile the idea of empiricism is. Empiricism established experience as the source of knowledge, but it thereby raised a new question. If reason and experience are our tools, can humanity use them to improve the world itself? That question became the heart of the Enlightenment. The sixth idea, progress, and the Enlightenment. The 18th century brought an idea that changed the very axis of Western thought. The world can become better. History was no longer a cycle of fate, or a repetition of myths, but a forward movement toward freedom, toward knowledge, toward justice. 18th century Europe, the science of Newton, the encyclopedias of Diderot, the critical philosophy of Kant. For the first time, people sensed that history was not repetition, but development. Voltaire fought fanaticism and church authority. Rousseau wrote about freedom and inequality. Kant gave the age its motto, sapere aude, dare to know, have the courage to use your own reason. Human reason can liberate people from ignorance and fear. Education is the main instrument of progress. Science and morality can improve social life. Human rights are universal and must be protected by law. The Enlightenment sparked revolutions. The American Revolution enshrined liberty in the Constitution. The French Revolution gave the world the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. The idea of progress became almost a new religion, but critics already warned, not all development is good. Rousseau argued that civilization corrupts man. Later, Nietzsche accused the Enlightenment of a naive faith in reason. And the 20th century, with its wars and totalitarian regimes, exposed the dark side of progress. We still live in the paradigm of the Enlightenment. When we talk about fighting poverty, protecting minority rights, advancing medicine or education, we think in terms of progress. But the 21st century has added new challenges. The climate crisis, technological dependence, growing inequality. Today the question is urgent. What does progress mean? Economic growth, sustainable development, the survival of the planet? The Enlightenment gave the world faith in the future, but it also created the illusion that reason can explain and fix everything. By the end of the 18th century, philosophy faced the need to critique itself. Out of this came new voices, Kant and Nietzsche, who taught us to doubt and to shatter illusions. The seventh idea, critique and doubt. After the euphoria of rationalism and the Enlightenment, philosophy confronted the need to criticize itself. Not everything can be explained by reason. Not everything can be justified by progress. At this moment entered Immanuel Kant and Friedrich Nietzsche, thinkers for whom doubt and the destruction of illusions became essential tools. Late 18th to 19th century. Europe lived on the legacy of the Enlightenment, faith in reason, in science, in progress. But Kant asked a radical question: what are the limits of reason? In the Critique of Pure Reason, he showed, reason does not see the world as it is. It sees only through the forms of our consciousness, space, time, categories. And in the 19th century, Nietzsche struck with a hammer against all values. In The Gay Science, he declared, God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. This was not merely anti-religious rhetoric, but a diagnosis. The old values no longer worked, and new ones had yet to be created. Kant. Reason is limited. It does not grasp things in themselves, only appearances. Human knowledge is always conditioned by the structure of consciousness. Nietzsche. Values are not given from above, but created by human beings. The old system of morality and faith has collapsed, and the individual must create meaning anew. Kant marked the boundaries of science and reason, but opened a space for freedom and morality. Nietzsche dismantled ethics and religion, but thereby posed a challenge. Who will take on the task of creating new values? Their critique became the foundation for new movements: phenomenology, psychoanalysis, existentialism, postmodernism. Today, we live in an age of post-truth, of fake news, of collapsing authorities. The ability to think critically, to question the obvious, to distrust ready-made answers. This is the legacy of Kant and Nietzsche. Every time we ask, but what if things are not as they seem? We continue their work. Critique destroyed the illusion of absolute truths, but in doing so, it placed the human being at the center. If there is no external authority, then the individual must become the source of value. From here arises humanism. Kant taught us to doubt everything, but there is one thing you don't need to doubt: the value of a subscription. Try it yourself. One click, and the world feels just a little clearer. The eighth idea, humanism, and the value of the person. Philosophy has always sought foundations in the cosmos, in the divine, in reason. But in the Renaissance and beyond, a new force arose. The human being became the measure of all things. Humanism affirmed the individual is not a means, but an end. The 14th to 16th centuries. The Renaissance. Europe emerged from the Middle Ages, when humans were seen primarily as sinners, as parts of God's plan. Humanists, Petrarch, Erasmus of Rotterdam, Pico della Mirandola, elevated human dignity. Pico, in his famous oration on the dignity of man, wrote, "God placed man at the center of the world to choose for himself what he is to be, animal or angel." The human being possesses dignity and freedom. The person is an end, not a means. Education and culture elevate the human being and make them whole. Rights and freedoms belong to all, not just the elite. Humanism passed through the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, and became the foundation of modern human rights. Kant formulated the categorical imperative: act in such a way that you treat humanity, always at the same time as an end, and never merely as a means. In the 20th century, humanism entered a crisis. Totalitarian regimes showed that human dignity could be trampled, but this made it even more urgent. After the Second World War, the world adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Today, humanism lives in debates about gender equality, minority rights, child protection, bioethics. Every time we affirm, no one should suffer for the sake of another's profit. We are speaking the language of humanism, but challenges remain: technocracy, wars, algorithms that reduce people to data points. Whether humanism can withstand the 21st century is one of the great questions of our time. Humanism affirmed the value of the individual, but the 20th century revealed a new challenge. The world itself offers no guarantee of meaning. Against this background arose the philosophy of existentialism and the absurd. The ninth idea: absurd and existence. The 20th century delivered a new shock to philosophy. The world itself guarantees no meaning. Religious and Enlightenment foundations had collapsed, and philosophers declared the human being is thrown into the world without instructions. This became the heart of existentialism and the philosophy of the absurd. The 19th century: industrialization, crisis of faith. Nietzsche proclaimed the death of God. The 20th century: world wars, the Holocaust, the atomic bomb. Humanity saw that progress does not save us from horror. Sometimes it produces it. Against this background arose the philosophies of Kierkegaard, Camus, Sartre. Kierkegaard: the human being faces the anxiety of freedom. We are free, but that very freedom terrifies us, because choice cannot be avoided. Sartre: existence precedes essence. There is no given purpose. We define ourselves through our choices. Camus: the world is absurd. It offers no meaning, yet humans hunger for meaning. The response is revolt, to live in spite of the absurd. The myth of Sisyphus: responsibility for meaning rests entirely on the individual. Existentialism became the philosophy of the post-war generation. It inspired writers, artists, filmmakers. But critics called it pessimistic, subjective. Marxists saw it as individualistic. Analytic philosophers dismissed it as too literary, and yet it gave us the language to describe the crises of identity and the loneliness of modern life. Today, existential crises are everywhere: career choices, questions of meaning, the feeling of absurdity in the flood of social media and endless news. Every time we ask, what is the meaning of my life? We are in dialogue with Kierkegaard, Sartre, and Camus. Even modern therapies, Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, existential psychology, grew directly out of this tradition. Existentialism showed the world gives no meaning, and humans must create it themselves. But if everyone creates their own values, what remains of the idea of universal truth? This leads us into postmodernism. Camus said, the world is absurd, but leaving a like, that's a perfectly meaningful act. And if you drop a comment about your own Sisyphus stone, well, that's a true philosophical upgrade. The 10th idea: pluralism and postmodernism. The 20th century ended with the demolition of the last bastions of one single truth. Postmodernism declared there is no universal viewpoint, only a plurality of interpretations, stories, and narratives. The 1960s to 1980s, after World War II, after decolonization, after cultural revolutions, it became clear the Western universal truth was not the only one. Philosophers like Foucault, Derrida, Lyotard challenged the grand narratives, the belief that history moves toward progress, that science can provide final truth, that there is one moral order. There is no single truth. There are many discourses. Language is not a transparent medium for reality, but an instrument of power. Foucault. Where there is power, there is knowledge. Grand systems, progress, religion, science must be deconstructed. Pluralism of cultures and perspectives is a value in itself. Derrida proposed deconstruction, analyzing texts to reveal hidden contradictions. Foucault showed that norms and truths are produced through institutions of power. Lyotard wrote about the end of grand narratives, but postmodernism was accused of relativism. If everything is interpretation, how do we fight injustice or lies? If there is no truth, what separates knowledge from manipulation? Today we live in a postmodern condition, social media filled with competing truths, multiple identities, cultural wars. On the one hand, freedom, no single correct picture. On the other, chaos, the loss of shared orientation, post-truth, polarization. Postmodernism gave us tools to see the hidden games of culture and power, but it also left us with the pressing question: if there is no truth, what can hold common life together? Postmodernism shattered the illusion of universal foundations, but it also revealed another side, in plurality itself. In the clash of voices, modernity is born. In the end, philosophy teaches us not to hand down final answers, but to ask better questions. We have traveled a long road, from the first Greeks who dared to trust reason, to the postmodernists who dismantled the very idea of truth. Seen together, these 10 ideas are not just the history of philosophy. They are the history of us. Each age offered its answers: logos, ethics, democracy, rationalism, empiricism, progress, critique, humanism, existence, pluralism. Together they form the fabric of the world we live in today. But philosophy is not a museum. It continues in each of us. Every choice, every debate, every doubt you have is the continuation of this great drama of ideas. And the deepest lesson is simple and powerful. Philosophy does not give us recipes. It teaches us to ask better questions, and questions are what carry us forward. Now I want to ask you, which of these 10 ideas speaks to you most personally? The one that explains how the world works, the one that teaches how to live in it, or the one that destroys all answers and leaves only freedom? Write in the comments. I read everyone, and I reply. If you found this video meaningful, subscribe to The Rational Voice. I already have a whole series on freedom, and it will continue, as well as videos on Kierkegaard, on Foucault, on Nietzsche, on Kant's ethics, each exploring a different fragment of this philosophical map. And if you want to keep going, click to the next video in this playlist. There, we'll dive even deeper. Philosophy is not just books on a shelf. Philosophy is the voice of reason, and that voice speaks in each of us.